Years ago, an editor turned down my self-help book because she said, "The truth just isn't selling this year." And she was right. We love to be lied to. We love it when politicians, marketers, and gurus tell us that what we want will be fast, easy, and simple. But I'm going to tell you the reality that nobody wants to hear. The only way out of our current national and personal nightmare is slow, hard, and complicated. The salesman in the White House understood that one rule for getting people to buy him as our leader. All he had to do was tell the gullible public that fixing our problems would be fast, easy, and simple. And he won. Twice. So, yes, we've seen that you can fool a lot of people a lot of the time if you simply use those three magic words: fast, easy, and simple. Now, we have some evidence about whether that magic formula works. So let's check it out. My name is Dr. Glenn Berger, and as a psychotherapist, coach, and mentor, I've spent decades helping people get unstuck. And what I'm going to show you is that our national political circus is just our personal psychology written on a massive scale. Now, having read the words of the wise and gone to the mountain myself, I've learned a little bit about what I like to call the universal laws of reality. And one of those universal laws was revealed in a parable from the ancient Chinese sage Mencius, who warned that you cannot pull the shoots. So what does that mean? This means that growth happens at nature's rate. When tiny shoots come out of the ground, if you tug them and try to make them grow faster than nature allows, you'll simply pull them out of the ground. And that's what I observe in people. And that's backup for my hard, slow, and complicated claim. But am I right? Another thing that our sales gurus tell us is that we must speak with absolute conviction and certainty. Well, I'm going to break that rule too. What if I've been wrong about this? What if my biased eye isn't seeing what might be right in front of my nose? Maybe getting what you want in life is fast, easy, and simple. Now, the beauty of this current moment, if we want to call it beauty, is that we have evidence for our national experiment in this sales pitch. So, let's see how it's going. Our very own Elmer Gantry, Lonesome Rhodes, Professor Harold Hill, Buzz Windrip, and Wizard of Oz. I'll tell you who all those people are later on in this video. Our leader promised to end the Ukraine war, lower grocery prices, dismantle the deep state, eliminate $2 trillion in spending, end birthright citizenship, end the income tax with tariffs, deport 20 million people, bring manufacturing back to America, end conflict in the Middle East, in fact, bring world peace, and have so much winning that we would get tired of winning on his first day in office. Now, whether you like those promises or not, the evidence suggests that I wasn't wrong. Those universal laws of reality have some teeth. None of those promises came true. Not on the first day. Not at all. It all started with Elon Musk's Doge, which turned into an utter disaster. Musk claimed that in no time at all he would end the Washington bureaucracy and end our budget deficits. Now, the few billion that he may have excised from our spending has already been spent in the Iran war, and the main result of the program has been untold children's deaths. Facts, check it out. When the American people saw that result after a massive backlash, Musk retreated, mewling with his tail between his legs, to go on to his more important task of selling his AI platform, Grok, by allowing it to make nude fakes of the mother of one of his children. Trump's special relationship with his doppelganger Putin has yielded nothing but more death and destruction. The Ukraine war not only didn't end in a day, it grinds on. Simmering in the Orwellian Peace Prize Iran non-war, oil prices are skyrocketing, and grocery prices, along with inflation in general, are following suit. Iran didn't capitulate in 1 minute. Talking about that Iranian excursion, peace has not been brought to the Middle East. Quite the contrary, we now see chaos, destruction, and death spreading throughout the region, and economic pain is spreading throughout the world, including at the pump. Thankfully, birthright citizenship remains. The administration hasn't quite figured out how to toss out the Constitution yet. We still have an income tax, and the seesaw of tariffs ends up being an additional regressive tax on the American consumer without ending our deficit spending. The tariffs were named unconstitutional, so there's a strong likelihood that whatever monies came in from these taxes will have to be returned. Yes, Stephen Miller and his minions are doing their best to create concentration camps and hiring anyone with a trigger-happy finger to round up just about anyone with brown skin that they can find. But even the Nazis couldn't round up all the Jews on day one. Thankfully, our incompetent band of sociopaths are way off track to that 20 million number. In contrast to the manufacturing boom promised, there's been a net loss of 100,000 jobs in that sector, mostly blamed on Trump's tariffs and the economic uncertainty that he's created. The tariffs failed precisely because slapping a tax on imports is a simplistic, fast shortcut to a complex problem of middle-class decline that actually requires slow, complicated structural rebuilding. Now, I considered the possibility that I got the universal laws of reality wrong, but I think I just presented a lot of evidence that fast, easy, and simple is bullshit. Now that the presidential campaign is over, and the bamboozling is proving to be just that, what's the news story that the administration is putting out there? Believe it or not, they're trying to hijack the universal law that change is slow, hard, and complex as the excuse for why their approach is backfiring. For example, tariffs have been causing Americans pain. Economic analysts estimate that these import taxes are costing the average U.S. household between $1,000 and $2,400 extra per year, driving up prices on everything from groceries to cars and appliances. The administration argues that this financial squeeze is a necessary sacrifice to force multinational companies to stop relying on cheap foreign labor, to build factories on U.S. soil, and revitalize American manufacturing, and that things will improve over time. Give it time, they tell us now. The American agricultural sector has taken a massive hit. The 2025-2026 crop season resulted in an estimated $34.6 billion in losses, particularly devastating the soybean market, as foreign buyers simply sourced their crops from other countries. In response, Republican lawmakers and administration officials are telling farmers that they must endure this shrunken export market to level the global playing field, and that this will lead to better days in the future. Not so fast, is it? In fact, this abrupt outface on reality is the exact sentiment that has become the central justification for the massive military operations that the US and Israel launched against Iran at the end of February. When President Trump addressed the nation on February 28th to announce those major strikes, he directly addressed the inevitable human and economic toll. He stated, "We may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future." However, the short-term pain side of that equation has escalated rapidly over the last several weeks. According to recent Pentagon leaks to Congress, just the first week of this new phase of the war cost the U.S. roughly $11 billion. The U.S. is rapidly chewing through its stockpiles of incredibly expensive missile defense interceptors like the $13 million THAADs. To keep the campaign going, the administration is reportedly drafting emergency supplemental funding requests running anywhere from $50 billion to $200 billion. Iran's retaliation has effectively paralyzed shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, which normally handles about a quarter of global seaborne oil as well as other things. As a result, global oil benchmarks recently spiked above $112 a barrel, and if the strait remains closed, economists are warning of a massive secondary spike in gas prices and inflation back home, compounding the economic squeeze that Americans are already feeling from the administration's tariffs. Yes, it turns out that war, more often than not, is slow, hard, and complicated. Now, whether we accept the universal law that good things take time, effort, and depth or not, the law will still be in effect. By denying it, we see that this only causes destruction and unnecessary pain, and the piper calls its due sooner or later. Yet, despite this evidence, as David Hannum allegedly said, there's a sucker born every minute. Some 40% of the American public still prefer the gooey comfort of the fast, easy, simple lie rather than face the actually more promising reality of slow, difficult, and complicated. Why do they buy it? Because our macro politics are simply a reflection of our micro psychology. We get the politicians we do because untrained brains are predisposed to immediate reward, and everything in our culture is built to exploit that. Before I get into the internal psychology of it all, we need to acknowledge that there's a long lineage of American characters from fiction who fit the mold of the charismatic charlatan or the American confidence man who turns into a demagogue, just like our current leader. These prescient creators, these authors, anticipated the rise of a Trump. The only mystery is why it took so long for someone like this to assume the ultimate mantle of power. There is no perfect psychopathological category in the standard manual of diagnoses for this type, but each one of those characters that I named before, Elmer Gantry, Lonesome Rhodes, Professor Harold Hill, Buzz Windrip, and the Wizard, share common characteristics. While their specific arenas differ, Gantry was in evangelical religion, Rhodes was in mass media and television, Hill was in sales, and Windrip was in fascist politics in America, in the book It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis. They all operate using the exact same psychological playbook. They're masters of the common touch. They present themselves as straight-talking men of the people who understand the struggles of the average citizen. In reality, this is a highly calculated performance. Behind closed doors, They often view their followers with contempt, seeing them merely as gullible marks. They do not persuade with logic. They mesmerize with rhythm, rhetoric, and showmanship. Whether it's a revival tent, a television broadcast, a town square, or a political rally, they're entertainers first. They use emotional crescendo and fast talking to bypass their audience's critical thinking. These are classic hypnotic techniques. They possess a predatory instinct for figuring out what a community is most desperate for, whether it's salvation, civic pride, a return to a mythical golden age, or protection from outsiders, and they sell the illusion of it. They represent the dark side of American exceptionalism, hustle, and salesmanship. They embody the idea that reinvention and aggressive self-promotion can be weaponized to achieve absolute power, wealth, or adoration without any underlying moral foundation. The ultimate symbol of the type might be the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain. He is a literal carnival barker and balloon salesman from Omaha who uses pyrotechnics, fear, and grand promises to rule an entire nation despite having no actual power to make anything happen. These masters of manipulation have no contact with a conscience, and those people we conventionally call sociopathic. They prey on human weakness and exploit it for their own gain of money and power with no concern about the consequences to others. We now have entire industries of advertisers, marketers, and salespeople who have turned these techniques into a science. These manipulations have been embedded into our technologies. They're inescapable, as we're offered every shortcut to fulfillment, drowning out the voices of wisdom that tell us that fulfillment comes from immersion. It comes from the investment of time and energy. Why spend a lifetime cultivating enlightenment when you can take the shortcut of a couple of bumps of cocaine, some milligrams of MDMA, a THC gummy, and a few cocktails? Oh, and if you actually want to put some effort into it, you can go upstate and vomit into a bowl and meet the Great Mother on that ayahuasca journey. If you're not into that, find your favorite kink by clicking a button or two on your phone. Try for that get-rich-quick scheme of online gambling. Feel the satisfaction of pressing the angry emoji on your political enemy's 30-second obnoxious TikTok. Here's the problem with fast, easy, and simple. All those promises turn out to do just the opposite. Whether we're talking about wars in the Middle East or your inability to find satisfaction in work, love, and life, every time you try to take a shortcut to human fulfillment, spiritual growth, or complex systemic problems, you get further away from your destination. It's not easy to resist, which is yet another iteration of the same problem. Temptation is everywhere. The wise of all time have been banging this drum of the true path since Buddha sat under the tree for 49 days. Moses traveled through the desert for 40 years, and Jesus wandered through the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. Those numbers, they're symbols for a long, difficult time. But has anyone listened? Clearly, only a few. In fact, this is central to the problems that people bring into my therapy office. This leads to one way of defining what we amorphously call neurosis. People who are stuck in their lives, who are living far beneath their potential, and whose symptoms include self-loathing, avoidance, procrastination, fear, bad habits, pessimism, resistance to learning, and poor self-care. I don't like these words like neurosis, anxiety, or depression because I don't believe they capture human complexity. I prefer the construction of that same ancient Chinese sage Mencius that I mentioned a while ago, who wrote about this 2,500 years ago and called it having a lost heart. He tells us that in order to find our hearts, we need to self-cultivate. That is, just like the farmer needs to tend his land, respecting the process of natural growth and understanding the complex laws of nature, a person needs perseverance and daily work to have the greatest yield, which is to be in a constant condition of growth, moving ever forward to becoming our best selves and living our best lives. He tells us that when we follow that path of daily work, of digging deep, of nonstop learning, that through that process itself, we find access to what he calls flood-like chi, which scientists might call mitochondria, but which we mystics might call the infinite energy of the universe. That hard, long work builds on itself and leads to freedom, success, and fulfillment. We have been sold a bill of goods, believing that everything will come to us without time, effort, and learning. The result is that all too many of us are spiritually flabby. Just like we get into good shape by working out several times a week, we develop the capacities for pride, confidence, courage, strength, faith, and love by working on them every day. If we don't work out, we get physically flabby and susceptible to all kinds of physical ailments. If we don't take the slow, hard, and complicated path of daily development, we become spiritually flabby and subject to all kinds of psychological ailments. We become increasingly susceptible to the hypnotic charms of the demagogue, the drug, or the phone. And that is how our country ended up where it is right now. The clever sociopaths have rendered the masses pliable and weak. And anyone like me, who's saying slow, hard, and complicated is better than fast, easy, and simple, is simply drowned out by all the noise that screams the opposite. The facts are in, folks. If you have any doubt, check out the news. The ancients knew it, but they were ignored in their day, and very few of us want to pay attention to the truth that we actually have to do something hard to get better. I guess my editor was right. This message, it's just not selling this year. If you're one of the few who is willing to follow the slow, hard, and complicated path to fixing yourself and the broken world, subscribe to the channel. Leave me a message. See you next time.